Karsten was approached about the possibility of doing a volume on juveniles and punishment. The volume would be included in a series of books that the press publishes on disputed issues, important contemporary issues about which there are many different views, and some of the issues are emotionally charged, socially very important, and that is how the book arose. It includes material on sort of general theories of the aim and justification of punishment, and also a number of contributions that talk specifically about issues concerning juveniles and punishment. But part of what is distinctive and especially important about the book is that it really is aimed at use by students so that they can attain a really textured and informed understanding of the issues, why they are so contested, and the different angles of approach to the issues and different positions that have been taken on them. And if you have a look at the table of contents, and certainly later if you have a look at the book itself, you'll see that provides very, very nice coverage of those sorts of things, so that somebody who works with the book will really come away from it much more fluent and much more informed about the issues and the debates about them. So this is a volume that's especially suitable for courses, as well as addressing a very important issue that any alert person should at least give some thought to. And to help us down that path, first, did you want to make a few remarks?
I will make a few remarks.
Let me just get that.
Okay, so I want to say a little more about the book in general, and I want to spend most of my time actually talking about the issues, because you can look at the book, but I think the issues are important, and you may have certain questions about some of the issues, and they're very controversial issues. Let me just mention one other part as how this got started. I am in an interdisciplinary studies program as well as the philosophy program, and Kimura for a number of years also started. Anybody here in interdisciplinary studies? Anybody take it? Okay. Kimura and I both taught in the interdisciplinary studies program. Every course is jointly taught by two people simultaneously, and we taught one course called Crime and Punishment, and we taught another one called Punishment, for and against. So we felt very prepared to start doing this book. I'll also mention that we work very nicely. The Open Society Institute sponsors this, as John mentions. They also send free copies to debate coaches and debaters in both high schools and in colleges. And then it's on Amazon. You can buy the book and use it for textbooks and so forth. So part of our idea was we needed to get articles that were readable by undergraduates. Now, I know how many of you have read various articles. You say, why do they have to write like that? And you know something? Not all serious thinkers have to write like that. Sometimes I think they have to write like that because it sounds very esoteric. And among the people we solicited for original articles was John Jacobs, who has done some very good writing that is accessible, and he wrote a very accessible piece for our article. Both of us wrote pieces for our article, and we got several other people, and then we just went through some of the articles that exist out there through electronic resources and everything else, and we put together what we think is really a debate book, pro and con. So every section makes clear that there's not one side here. There are two sides. And it seems to me that that's not just for debate teams. That's what people in universities should be doing when they explore an issue. I should also mention that one of the people we worked with, the in-house editor, Eleanor Van Dasen, very, very good editor, one of the best editors.
Would you stand?
Could you want to
I'll give you
stand
a
for a
hand.
moment? She was absolutely terrific. She absolutely wouldn't let us get by. We said something, and she said, you know, this doesn't quite make sense. We looked back at it and said, yeah, you know, but it doesn't quite make sense. And then we rewrote it, and hopefully now it all makes sense. I want to say one or two things about the book as a teaching tool, because in addition to using debate teams, I think it would be a very good teaching tool, especially in a place like John Jay College of Criminal Justice. So, for example, in the philosophy department, any philosophy department, questions of punishment and moral responsibility are key questions, and that's highlighted within the issues of the book. In addition, any kind of interdisciplinary course dealing with issues of punishment, the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system, and then indeed, John Jay College is unique in having a Department of Law and Police Science and a criminal justice department. So this is quite a book that would be quite useful in any number of courses in which you want to either discuss punishment or specifically the juvenile justice system. I want to say something in general about the problem of juveniles and punishment. So I'm going to do it by asking a question, and then I'm going to give you an interesting statistic. How many of you, if you are honest and think back to when you were teenagers, will admit that you did at least one, if not more acts, that if you were caught, you would go in front of juvenile court. You could be arrested. How many of you will admit that? Well, I would say two. I won't tell you what I did, but it's okay. That is in keeping with the general statistic. The estimate is that 80 to 90% of all juveniles are defined as people under 18, have committed at least one, if not many acts that they could be arrested for and go in front of the juvenile justice system. Now, many of them do not get caught, or they're lucky enough to have parents that get them off, and a variety of other things. But here's another interesting thing. If you do get caught, and you don't have the right parents or lawyers to get you off, and you get mandated to you go to juvenile court, and you go to some kind of juvenile detention system, the chances are that it is now highly likely that you're on your way to being a future criminal. They've done studies in which they've looked at all the variables, race, level of impoverishment, gender, geography, all these things play a part. You know, who becomes the criminal? The thing that stands out most, the most significant variable, is if you have been processed by the juvenile justice system. That makes it more likely than any of these other things. So there's a very interesting paradox here. The juvenile justice system was set up originally to undercut crime. And if you look at just these statistics, and there's much more to say about it that I don't have time to say now, it looks like the juvenile justice system promotes crime. In fact, it may be the major promoter of crime. And part of it is the concept of punishment of juveniles. So I want to say one other thing, because people may not be familiar. How many people have some familiarity, not that you went to court yourself, with the idea, with what happened, the background of the juvenile justice system? Okay. So I'm just going to give you 3 dates. There's a lot more. One is 1825. In New York City, they established the first house of refuge. The idea is that these kids are running wild. We need to bring them into some kind of family environment. But it's going to be a center, it's going to be a community center, so to speak, and everybody will learn proper ways of acting. And one of the interesting things about it is you didn't just have to break the law. If you were a 13-year-old and were caught smoking on the street, somebody might decide to pull you up and put you in one of these houses. And over time, although they were supposed to be, this is all supposed to be about rehabilitation, there was lots of evidence that there was tremendous brutality within these houses. And they're developed within Chicago, what was sometimes called the Chicago School, which was trying to reform the juvenile justice system, bring it back to its earlier rehabilitation centers. part of the problem is there was no court oversight. And what they succeeded in doing in 1899 is establishing in Illinois the first Juvenile Court Act, which then caught on and then became Juvenile Court Acts throughout the country. In fact, so now there was oversight, and you wouldn't necessarily just get picked up because you were smoking. Nonetheless, you had no rights. The judge could simply decide on the basis of whatever what to do with you. And there was a very famous case that came in 1967. What happened is a 14-year-old named Gerald Galt. A woman accused him of having made an obscene phone call. The sheriff came, whisked him away. Nobody, his parents had no idea where he was. He never got to confront his accuser because there was nothing in the Juvenile Court Act that said he had to do it. There was no trial. The judge says, okay, we think you made the obscene phone call. He denied it. You're going to go to Juvenile Detention Center till you're 21. And they brought it to court. And finally, the court did decide in Re Galt that maybe there should be a little oversight. Maybe you should have a right to meet your accuser. Maybe you should be able to have some kind of trial. And so that sounded good. Except the evidence is that after 1967, in most states in the United States, they basically ignored this. So you can still be sort of picked up, and somebody can accuse you, and you never meet your accuser, and you have no right to trial, and you go to Juvenile Detention Center. If you're not lucky with a really good lawyer who somehow manages to finesse the system. One of the things to say about it, the juvenile court system became more and more punitive as a result of something that happened in the 1980s and 1990s, which was a media, I would say a media hype, but it was a major media set of articles that talked about the super predator. Teenagers are running around in these temporary gangs, and they're running wild, and they have violent sprees, and so on and so forth. I've got to do something about it. And it became more and more punitive. Now, actually, the prediction was false. But they did have a few cases. Some of the cases, anybody remember the major Central Park case? How many people remember that? That was one of the cases. Turns out they were innocent. At least they were innocent of that. So those kinds of cases brought to the attention, and the juvenile court system in particular got more and more punitive. A number of things, one other thing to say about this, people know about the mass incarceration system. The United States, with 5% of the world population, has 25% of the world's prisoners. But very specifically, in terms of youth, the United States has more incarceration of young people under 18, than any other major industrialized country. It has 7 times the rate of Great Britain. It has 18 times the rate of France, and you can go on. It's much worse than China and Russia, which gets big play about how they're unfair to lots of people when they criminalize people so easily. So it's not just the general mass incarceration system. It moves into youth. Okay. I'm going to try to move fast on this because I want to say something about the book in general. So the first thing I'll say about the book is there are really 2 kinds of articles in the book. If you look at your table of contents, there are sections 1, 2, and 6 are one kind of set of articles. They deal with the question of punishment in general, which is why I say the book can be taught in courses that aren't even necessarily mostly about the juvenile justice system, but about punishment. And very specifically, part 1, which is about definition. You say, who cares about definition? But definitions are important, especially in issues of punishment. People do not agree what punishment means. Outside the legal system, boxer hits his opponent, he gave a punishing blow. Is the guy innocent? It doesn't make any sense. Some people think it's a kind of family resemblance notion. Even within the legal system, there's not a clear agreement. So somebody wants to go to prison. Maybe they're a masochist, or maybe they just think it'll be easier in prison to get fed. So is prison a punishment? And so there are a variety of questions. One thing that comes out of that section, which I think is really important, and I'll say why in a moment, is the idea that there may be a very strict distinction between what is sometimes called reparations, in which the person is accountable and has to pay the victim, and punishment. And that becomes important in thinking about alternatives to punishment. One of the possible alternatives to punishment discussed in Part 6 is about reparations. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on the second section, partly because I contributed a piece to the second section, but also because I think it's very important. The reason that is generally most given by many people when you first ask, at least unreflectively, why punish, is they deserve it. And that's the theory of retribution. And John Jacobs wrote a really interesting article about retribution in which he argued, among other things, it's not just an intuition, which is what a lot of people say, but it actually exemplifies and manifests the values of liberal democracies. So if you're interested in that, get the book, you can read that piece. There are also some very interesting mixed theories of punishment, punishments which mix retribution and various consequentialist utilitarian concerns. And we've included in the piece in that section a rather unusual piece called a hip-hop theory of punishment, written by a lawyer who knows very well hip-hop culture and knows very well hip-hop music and draws out of it what kind of theory underlies of punishment. And interestingly enough, you might think, oh, well, they don't believe in retribution. No, hip-hop culture does believe in retribution, but it believes that it needs to be tempered by all kinds of community concerns and concerns about mass incarceration of drugs and a variety of other things. So it also becomes a mix. I have a piece in there in which I just will give you my conclusions. I can't give you the argument, in which I argue, as opposed to probably the majority of philosophers and legal thinkers, that punishment in the legal system is in fact a form of controlled revenge. And if you think that's true, I make some arguments for it, one of two things follow. One is you can add revenge to it. Why not have more revenge? Why not really represent the victim's desire for revenge? And there are people in what's called the victims' rights movement that want to do that. My own move is to say maybe we should be very suspicious of the retributive aspects of our legal system and expunge the legal system. If anybody knows how the legal system is structured, that would mean a fundamental restructuring of the general criminal justice and juvenile justice system as we now know it. I'll just mention one other thing that I have an interest in, which is the whole idea of, and this becomes very important, life for juveniles without parole. A couple of things. It used to be that juveniles who did terrible crimes, they'd get the death penalty. They could be 14. That was ultimately overruled in 2005 in a case called Roper versus Simmons. But then the question is, well, what do they get? And it was still the case they get life imprisonment without parole. There are cases where, I read about one case where this 14-year-old kid came along with his friends. He did nothing except sort of stand around. His friends started to rob somebody. He got scared. He hid under the table. They asked him later, why did he stay there? He said, I didn't want people to think I was a scaredy cat. He was in the process of robbing, somebody was killed. He's an accessory to murder. The court mandates life in prison without parole. He's now in his 30s. Maybe no hope of ever getting out. And things like that happen all the time. Now, there was finally a court case which says you can't mandate life in prison without parole, but different judges in different states can still decide to do it. So it's not something which is done. So I'm going to end my remarks here and turn it over to Kimura. Kimura has done some marvelous work within the prison system, education within the prison system, and she's specifically, because that's one of the places her contribution is, going to talk about the possibilities of reforming the prison juvenile justice system and the possibilities of having alternatives to punishment.
Thank you.
Yes, oh, I just noticed, Martin Greenwald, who was head of the series for the Open Society Institute, the series that are the pro and con debates, which is not just this book, When Young People Break the Law. There's a marvelous book by David Cole, who writes for The Nation, which is about the controversy between civil liberties and security, and a whole set of other books. Martin, would you stand? Just thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stuhl, for that introduction. Really appreciate that. I welcome everybody. It's really a pleasure to have all of you here today. And I want to highlight several different comments and elaborate a little bit on what Carson has said. Boy, do I look like an idiot. The stuff I need is not where it is. All right, so here it is. Oh, wait, do that. So I want to talk specifically about the chapter that I wrote in the book, and then elaborate also on just the concept of punishment in the context in which I've worked when I'm working with people. For example, I just finished a project through the Osborne Association, which does prison reentry work in New York State, with about 18,000 young people during a course of 3 years at Rikers. And I didn't teach cognitive skills there, but I supervised people who did. And it was pretty amazing, so I'll elaborate on that. But the point is, I have a lot of experience working with youth who have been incarcerated, 16 to 18 years old, and I actually worked with a few that were 14 and 15 in this case as well. And so I think, I just want to put that in context for you. So when you look at the table of contents, obviously, and you look on the section, part 5, on the last page, the title is there, The Need for Cognitive Skills Educational Therapy in Juvenile Justice. So, you know, when we debate issues, obviously there is a pro and con to everything, and I will be blunt with you and tell you that I, Professor Kimura, do not believe in the concept of punishment. So we have to define what punishment is. Well, it's interesting, because if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, there's a very, very interesting definition of what punishment is. It's the authoritative imposition of an undesirable or unpleasant outcome upon a group or individual in response to a particular action or behavior that is deemed unacceptable or threatening to some norm. Well, that's not good in my book, because through the years of experience that I've had, over 25 years of working on it with juveniles, but with adults in prison and jail, punishment doesn't help, and I'll talk about that more later. But the problem is that in this context, in the United States, what we can do, and often do, when we impose punishment is we talk about fines and we talk about penalties or confinement. And the problem that we have also, and you've probably read about this in the New York Times lately, is we have a cycle of people in this country that cannot afford to even pay basic fines let down by the court as adults, and so they end up in this cycle of what, everybody, right? They get incarcerated because they can't pay. And the same thing can happen with children when they're taken from the system. So in the context of punishment, let me talk a little bit about the chapter that I wrote. And so what is cognitive skills? Well, cognitive skills is a really interesting form of education because it really incorporates several different things. One of the things it incorporates is problem-solving skills. And what's interesting about problem-solving skills is that if you think about it, most people in this country, no matter who they are, really do not understand the distinction between a problem and a solution. And that might sound kind of odd, like, well, wait a minute, come on, we know what a problem is, we know what a solution is. But the reality is that most people cannot distinguish the two. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's living in denial about an issue in their life, let's say they're a drug addict, or they're an alcoholic, same thing, because alcohol is a drug. The person may say, well, no, I don't have a problem. So I remember a person I used to know, still do, that was drinking a lot, and she never got to the point where she recognized that she had a problem with alcohol until she wrapped her car around a tree and ended up waking up and going, what was that? But before that, she had done all other kinds of things, and everybody basically kowtowed to her, said, well, that's okay, I'll make the call for you, so it just perpetuated. So problem-solving skills is one of the aspects of cognitive skills. Another aspect of cognitive skills is social skills. The social skills obviously means learning how to get along in social situations like this, And for example, could somebody yell out, what's something that would be totally inappropriate to do in this social setting right now?
Spit.
Spit, exactly, right? Make sense? Now, if you talk to the juveniles in Rikers, they love to do that. And they'll do a few more things when you walk in the door too, just to get your what, everybody? Attention. Okay? But they're really out to lunch, right, figuratively speaking, when it comes to social skills. Third aspect of cognitive skills is critical thinking. And critical thinking is really crucial because most people that I've ever met, whether they're in and out of prison or not, don't have critical thinking skills. They don't know how to think outside the what, everybody? Box. So I'm going to ultimately ask the question, where is the leadership on this planet because of that? Because critical thinking skills have not been developed enough. Too many people want to conform, they don't want to question authority, etc. Well, juveniles who are incarcerated are really good at defying authority. That's why they're there. That makes sense? So they also need to learn how to tone it down, but also, here's the interesting thing that I've discovered after working with thousands of juveniles who have been incarcerated. A lot of them are really smart. A lot of them are really cool. They're all cool, they just don't know. And so if we develop those skills, they can go further than just about anybody else. Boy, can they connect the dots. What do you mean because of this professor, then that, then that? Yep. Okay, so how do I get there? Love it. Okay? So we have problem-solving skills, we have social skills, we have critical thinking skills, and another aspect of cognitive skills is anger management. That's the fourth one. So, as you can imagine, juveniles who are incarcerated have some real problems with anger. How many times have I gone into Rikers where I'm literally pulling kids off the window saying, could you come here and sit down? Instead of, if I want to punish them, I can call the corrections officer just like that. Hey, get him, I need him out of here. I'm not going to punish him, even if he slugs me, which hasn't happened. But I'll tell you a quick story about something that happened to me. The very first day, 3 years ago, when I started working at Rikers for this project, and I was supervising 23 other people that taught cognitive skills. I was outside, and I came in, and I wanted to just check out the kids in the rooms before the day actually started. So I came in, and let's pretend that well, I'll do it like this so we get it. So I'm coming in the room. I come in the room, and there's about as many people in this room now, about 35, as there were in the room. And they're running around, and they're looking at the windows, and they're doing all this stuff. And right as I come in, one of the kids picks up a chair, and he's going to go throw it at somebody over here because he's upset with him. He's really angry at this kid, okay? But as he's doing it, they slip a little bit, and so the chair actually comes right at me as I come in the door. So I duck. So I duck and I come in, and the kid looks at me, doesn't know what to do because he doesn't know who I am. And I said right to the kid, I said, ooh, you missed me. Like that, and I smiled at him and giggled. And the kid did what, do you think? What do you think he did?
First of all, you diffuse.
I did. I diffused the energy, didn't I? Right. So he started smiling, but then I was like, oh, what am I doing that for here, right? Okay, so I had him right away. Now, I could have had him punished. He certainly did something unacceptable. He's breaking the social norm within the context. But I said, you missed me. 2 days later, he shows up in another room. He comes knocking on the door while I'm teaching facilitators how to teach to these clients. We call them clients, participants. We don't want to call them inmates out of respect for them. He comes in, he knocks on the door, he comes in and he says, can you come in and watch my speech? And I said, well, I will in a minute, I just need to finish here. So I come in the room and he acts like I don't exist. Now he's doing what to me, right? He's doing this back at me. So he still doesn't have his social skills together and everything else we've been talking about. But the point is I got him and I didn't get him punished for it. Does that make sense? So we can use cognitive skills to actually open up people and make them more aware of what's going on. I also talk in the chapter about the concept of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance and cognition, of course, means thinking. Dissonance means we're out of whack. So there's something really interesting that goes on with young people who break the law. They believe, they actually see themselves, and they convince themselves that the actual conflict between right and wrong is something that doesn't really exist. It's out there, but I'm not going to look at it. And so they're juggling this around in their head, and they're like, I'm just not going to look at it. So as a result, cognitive behavioral therapy is very effective in getting them to at least see what's going on. That's very, very important. There's one program that I highlight in the book called Breaking Barriers, and it's written by a gentleman named Gordon Graham. Gordon Graham was incarcerated for over 23 years in a maximum security prison in Oregon, and 18 of those years he spent in solitary confinement. So this guy was the guy that really defied authority. But he was sitting there and he said to himself one day, you know what? I've got some wisdom here. I think I need to write a book and stop goofing off. And he did. And it really speaks to people who are in prison and all of those who are out of prison as well. And so I highlight that program as a possibility for people to really look at with cognitive skills. I believe that it's really important that we rethink the whole concept of corrections. And I close with that in the chapter. We have a department here at John Jay called Law and Police Science and Criminal Justice Administration. And within the criminal justice aspect of it, we have a minor that students can get, such as yourself, in corrections. But I'm going to be blunt with you and tell you that corrections in this country is a joke. And the reason it's a joke is because it spends too much time punishing and not educating, not rehabilitating, not caring, not being compassionate. Do I think that everybody in prison and jail ought to be let loose? No. I think that jails and prisons ought to be eliminated. I think we need to substitute it for something else. The children who are 16 to 18 years old and younger in this country that commit crimes are our future. They're also human beings. As a minister, I will also tell you that they are children of God. They are amazing if you get to know them. Do I want them in my home? No. Why not? Because they haven't figured it out yet, okay? And you get my drift. But the point is that corrections is a joke in this country because it does not emphasize cognitive therapy. It does not train enough of you to do what I do. So that's something to think about. I think that my chapter and this book in general is a great tool for debate because, as Professor Spruill pointed out, both sides of the issue are eloquently displayed in this book. But as you already know what I think about punishment. It's impractical, it's unrealistic, it's not going to help build community. So therefore I'm against it. I don't believe in punishing people. If somebody's late for my class at John Jay, I do not scorn them at the door. I call them up later, or I send them an email, or I talk to them after class and say, what's going on? If a client of mine that has been in prison for 10 years comes into my group and puts in little things here, and curls up in a ball, and puts his hoodie over, puts his sunglasses on, first day in group, should I punish him? No. But I'll play with him, right? And so I'll get the other clients to say, watch what I do, right? So then I'll sit there and I'll say, can you take that out of your ears? Right? Can you put your feet down on the floor? Can you take your hoodie off so I can see who you are? Can you take your sun? Oh, look at that! Now you got it. And then I do this, I'll play with you. Then, because you know what I'm going to do. And then I give the little one a high five, right? And you can do a high five with me and I go like that. And then the whole room laughs because I haven't done it the traditional way, right? Because it's an inside joke and I say, welcome to the club. And you got them. And you can get them. And they're amazing. So, in conclusion, I would say that we want to look at part 5 and 6 because they ask 2 general questions. Should the juvenile justice system be reformed? Obviously it needs to be. And my article talks about that, but there are other authors in there that are listed in your table of contents that add to it as well. And then in part 6, are there reasonable alternatives to punishment? Golash gives a really interesting quote about it, and I'll just conclude with that. He's quoted not only in the book, but also here, and he says, we ought not to impose such harm on anyone unless we have a very good reason for doing so. This remark may seem virtually trivial, but the history of humankind is littered with examples of the deliberate infliction of harm by well-intentioned persons in the vain pursuit of ends which harm did not further, or in the successful pursuit of questionable ends. These benefactors of humanity sacrificed their fellows, sorry about the sexist language, to appease mythical gods and tortured them to save their souls from a mythical hell, broke and bound the feet of children to promote their eventual marriageability, beat slow school children to promote learning and respect for teachers, subjected the sick to leeches to rid them of excess blood, and put suspects to the rack and the thumbscrew to the service of truth. They schooled themselves to feel no pity, to renounce human compassion in the service of a higher end. The deliberate doing of harm in the mistaken belief that it promotes some greater good is the essence of tragedy, Golash says. We would do well to ask whether the goods we seek in harming offenders are worthwhile and whether the means we choose will indeed secure them. So I ask you to keep that in mind as you read the book and debate it. But I will conclude with that for now, and we'll open it soon for comments and questions from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. 2 comments. One is that particular article that you referred to gives all kinds of practical suggestions as to what could realistically be alternatives to punishment. I think a lot of people who are very skeptical of punishment say, but what's the alternatives? And there are real alternatives that have been studied and explored and experimented with and often have great success. The other thing I wanted to say just about cognitive skills, I once taught in the prison system, and I taught a course on critical thinking. And among the various sections of the course was a course on how to make choices. And you do a kind of decision tree and you look at consequences. And for me, this was a little boring, you know, okay, so you think about consequences. And the class was absolutely amazed by this. They said, this is the best thing they ever heard. I said, why? And one person said, it never occurred to me that you could think about consequences before you act. And then I understood why he was in prison.
That's true.
John Jacobson's going to make a couple of remarks.
I'll say a couple of things very briefly.
Maybe you can come over here because we have the camera. We're videotaping this whole process. And if you speak, they're going to check you out too. And then we're going to have a few minutes of question and answers, and then we'll get
And let me jump in.
You know, I've been at John Jay College only since January 2011. For 25 years prior to that, I was at another institution. And very soon after arriving at John Jay, meeting people, going to talks by faculty members and so forth, it became pretty clear to me that the sort of prevailing intellectual culture of the institution was social scientific. There are humanities departments, there's a Department of Natural Science. I mean, all of those disciplines are taught here, are studied here, students major in them and so forth. But in a kind of overall sense, the character, the intellectual character of the institution is social scientific and practice oriented as well. And you know, that led me to wonder a little bit what might my role as a philosopher in the midst of such an institution, focused on the issues on which it focuses, what might my role as a philosopher be? And what I settled on is the following, that sometimes people make the transition, or it sometimes takes the form of a leap, but they make the move from data or from facts or from evidence to policy, to recommendations, to notions about what the state should do, what the government should do, how things should be changed, and so forth. Sometimes people make the transition from the facts to policy very swiftly. And I think an extremely important role for philosophy is to try to identify and map and negotiate the conceptual and the normative terrain between the facts and the recommendations about what we ought to do. Because very often when we're talking about what we ought to do or what they ought to do or what someone ought to do, that very often involves, at least indirectly, the state, the institutions and the agencies of the state. And that inevitably gives rise to questions about the scope and the legitimacy of various types of state power, the relationships between law and morality, the very, very complex traffic back and forth between the political legal order on the one hand and the sort of actual metabolism of civil society on the other. And so, as I say, it seemed to me that a role that philosophy is particularly well suited to, but also a role that it's extremely important for somebody to fulfill, is to slow down that transition from the facts to policy, not with a view to keeping things from happening, because so many important things very much need to be done, but just to articulate and explicate as fully as possible what I was calling the conceptual and the normative terrain between what we take the facts to be and what we think we ought to do. You know, for almost anything that anybody believes, there are assumptions above it, implications below it, other beliefs connected with it horizontally. Almost anything that somebody takes for granted is likely to be much more complex than it typically seems in its relationship to other beliefs and assumptions and implications and so forth. And this is especially important with regard to normative commitments and normative claims about what we or they or someone ought to do. So that was the sort of disposition of mind that was motivating the paper that I wrote for this volume. And if you have a look at that chapter, I think that's what you'll find. It's not so much a matter of taking a position and trying to marshal as much evidence as possible in favor of it, but just explicating and noticing connections and taking consequences into account as fully as possible. So I hope I'm right that there's a genuine role for philosophy in all of this, but that's what I take its role to be.
Sure.
Yeah, we can have about 10 minutes for questions. And just ask that people make questions or comments short, so I mean, what people have time. Okay. Can you do medium?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
There's a lot to chew
Go
on
ahead.
there.
Go ahead.
So as I understand, Kimura, you said you wanted me to ask difficult questions.
Please do. Let's hear it. Let's go for it.
You use the dictionary definition.
Yeah.
I think commonly.
Yeah, from Oxford Dictionary.
Punishment.
Yeah.
As the authoritative imposition of an undesirable or unpleasant outcome upon an individual in response to a particular action or behavior that's deemed unacceptable or threatening someone.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So I want to first of all say that that's a very expansive definition of punishment, one that's much,
Sure.
much broader than just criminal punishment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And as I'm thinking through examples, and I'm of the mind that while hard cases may make bad law, hard cases make for good analysis, whether it be philosophical analysis or sociological analysis
Right.
or other kinds of analysis.
Okay.
And as you know, I was thinking about the examples that you gave, asking the kid to get out the window.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you can make a pretty strong case that fits the definition that you're using. If the student doesn't want to talk to you after class when you came late, then it seems to me that you can make a pretty good case that fits the definition.
So are you implying, if I can interject, are you implying that I'm actually for punishment because of those two cases?
Well, I would say, and I think that this is what John is getting at, is that it all depends on how you define the term.
Right.
And to define it in the terms that you did and that I just mentioned, it seems to me that not only are there certain examples that I don't think many of us would find very objectionable that would fit within that definition, but it's hard for me to conceive of how we could have anything like a functioning society unless we had punishment in that sense.
Here's how I would react to both of those comments. What I would say is, in the case of the young gentleman that's climbing the walls and throwing the chair around, yes, it was unacceptable behavior, but I didn't punish him because I didn't offer him something unpleasant in response. As a matter of fact, what I did was I said to him, "Oh, you missed me," right? And I made a joke out of it, trying to de-escalate the situation.
So I get
and
that. So then I would say
yeah.
then that that's an easy case, right? There are going to be instances, there have
Go in
to-
there with me and do that, yes.
Well, let's
It's
go
hard.
back. Let's go back to an example that I
Yeah.
think everybody
Yeah.
here will relate to.
Jump in.
Yeah, if I can make a comment on that.
Can I just finish
Okay,
this point
sure.
real quick?
Finish
So let me give you what I think is
Sure.
a hard case review.
Go
right?
for it, go for it.
I've had a student who's missed most of my classes
Sure.
all semester long.
Sure.
And I've reached out to him to talk to him
Sure.
to see what's going on.
Sure.
And those efforts have not succeeded.
Uh-huh.
Should I give him a good grade?
What's a good grade?
I think from the perspective of most students, certainly a passing grade on probably an A or a B.
So your implication is, your implication
And
is
if I
that,
give him a bad
Bad
grade,
grade, then
then
you're
that
punishing him?
certainly fits this definition.
that you're punishing him?
Can I
It's
just
the
see
authoritative
how-
imposition
for one
of an
second,
undesirable
how many other
result.
people would, we have about 5 or 6 minutes, how many other people would like to ask questions? Okay, so could I ask you to just wrap it up for the sake of
Sure,
other people?
but, so I'll just make a point. I
Sure,
think
please do.
this follows the organization of your book, right? Unless you conceptualize the term, you can't have an intelligible discussion about
Right.
this, and it's an incredibly important discussion to have.
Right.
But if we're using the term in different ways, then we're not really communicating. So I'll leave it at that.
Right, but thank you for that comment. We can follow up on that because there's another way.
Just
Go ahead.
one comment.
Yeah.
The first section of the book has 3 articles which actually disagree with each other.
Right.
Because it recognizes that there's a huge controversy over the very concept of punishment. Can I get another question? Let me get, okay.
Okay, so I see how,
Yeah.
I see how like in part 3 you said juveniles receive a different kind of punishment than adults, but do you go into like female juveniles and male juveniles? Like do you go into the gender kind of aspect of it?
We do, and there is a distinction, actually. For a long time in this country, the justice system has actually had the attitude that girls and women should not be punished or as severely punished as boys and young men or men. Because why, everybody? What was the thought pattern? And some judges still have that idea, and you can debate whether or not it's right or wrong. But why, in other words, ladies and gentlemen, do judges look at girls and boys and men and women differently in the court system? What are their expectations about what men are going to do? Yeah.
I probably would say that they wouldn't expect a woman or a young girl, commit such crimes or heinous crimes as the men would.
Right.
Because the men is more aggressive,
Correct.
more masculine. etc.
Correct.
And I would add
The
something.
females are gonna have children.
Although part of it is gender related, there's another very important issue that's involved, which is as there's the rise of this idea of the super predator, more and more people start saying,
Right.
you do the crime, you do the time. Doesn't matter how old you are. And there's one person in this book, in that section, which advocates that essentially, and someone else who does a real critique of it. So gender is also important, but it's also important to say, so what do we think about this idea, you do the crime, you do the time, doesn't matter how old you are. One thing to mention there are studies which show cognitively, in terms of not just behaviorally, but in terms of brain structure, that until the age of something like 2021, the part of the brain that is used to make decisions and understand consequences is not fully developed. Now, if that's true, then there's something really wrong with punishing a 14-year-old who did the same crime as a 30-year-old.
If you think back when you were in high school, when you were a teenager, and for some of you that wasn't too long ago, didn't you look at life differently than you look at it now? Didn't you look at the concept of consequences differently, cause and effect differently then than you do now? And some research says that it's up to the age of 25, just so but it depends on what you look at. Does somebody else want to jump in? With a comment?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Albert.
First, let me identify myself. My name is Albert Jones. I am a substance abuse criminal justice counselor. I do this for a living. I ain't read the book yet and buy it because I'm going to use that for some of the curriculum. I have on my caseload right now, 18-year-old stabbed his mother 4 times. Question to you, right? What is that?
Well, we'll start off that he stabbed his mother 4 times.
Right. What is that?
That's a fact, yeah.
I mean, what do we do with him then?
No.
What is
that?
it?
What
Great,
do you call
Albert.
it? Yes.
Okay.
Because that's first.
Okay. And what's your answer?
No ma'am, no sir. See, I'm a counselor. See, my job, right, is to make sure that this individual, according to society, practices productive citizenship. And I'm asking you, and I'm asking you, and I ask you, he is here right now. I'm going back to him in an hour.
Right.
Now, what is that? What is that? That's what I'm wondering. Stabbed his mother 4 times. What is that?
Well, the first thing is, why did you do it? What is his background? What are the issues there? That piece of information alone doesn't tell you anything.
Okay.
It might tell you a lot, because you know me.
Yes, I did his psychosocial, right? And I'm doing his treatment plan, right? And so basically, I want to know as a general consensus, what is that? Because that's what I fight every day. I fight the idea. I don't fight the person. Because 85% of my people become productive citizens. I have level 3 sex offenders, I have arsonists, I have murderers. That's my caseload. And 85% of them become productive citizens. But I'm asking, as a general consensus, what is that person to you? And I usually get that. Silence. Because,
I think
yeah,
the lady wants
please.
to jump in.
Yes.
I would say it's criminal behavior, like, it's, period. It's, you know, that's what you call it, criminal. The behavior itself says it's criminal.
Interesting.
But my opinion is, towards this topic is, should the system be more geared towards the mental health of these juveniles?
Why would you call that a criminal action?
I mean, the action itself, I would say is criminal.
Okay,
That's-
thank you, because I want to know, in that case, what is criminal? See, because basically when we find out, you're right, home is where you live, right? I did heroin with my aunts for 17 years, but I was top of my class at the time. Was that a criminal act? Because my aunt shot me with heroin at 10 years old.
But was that your choice, or was that?
I was 10 years old. I just did what I was told by my people.
Well, then that's not something you need to do.
Bingo. So now he stabs his mother 4 times. Was that a criminal act, or was that something that was already a part of his environment he just reacted to? Good question, because see, you just made a nomenclature. You just titled it as criminal. And that's what we're really fighting today. Because guess what? You don't even know what transpired or happened for that to even go on. Right? So I'm just saying,
no, that's great.
this is what we talk about.
Right,
See,
right.
because now the whole thing is, when I go back to him, I let that person know that, first of all, from this point, how do you feel about that? Consequential thinking, first of all, you have to even understand that's a consequence. That could be a natural act. Everybody fights in the house. Everybody throws down up in there. People tow guns up in the house, brothers and sisters, things of this nature. So how would that be criminal when it's normal and where he is?
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Sorry, but see,
no, that's good you're asking, and then we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So let me interject on 2 points. I would say, if I was answering the question real quickly, I would say this, and then we're going to open it up here so that we can do some other things.
We're gonna
Yeah.
break in a moment.
Right, I would just say this. I would say that when I teach anybody, I always think of the person that's right in front of me. So I take a person at their word in the moment. And so in other words, I can't do anything about my past. Future hasn't happened yet. The only thing that's guaranteed is what, everybody? In the moment. So if I've got a person that you're talking about sitting in front of me, that person's not doing anything criminal at that moment. So that's what I'm going to work with. I think that is part of the solution.
Exactly.
We need to start eating and talking with each other. And there's books here if you like.
People want to look at the book.
And thank you so much, everybody.